Pop Culture Coram Deo, episode 44, 44 Magnum, 44 years old. That's not true. Hey guys, it's Jeff. I'm here with Jared. We're here to talk about the movie Shazam, and we're glad you tuned in, again, to the 44th episode of the Pop Culture Coram Deo podcast. Jared Moore, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well, man. That was a good intro.
You like that intro?
It was a good job.
I'm going to rap it next time. That's not true either.
You need to rap. You've got enough rap in your head that you should be able to rap.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's true. I could probably break out in several of, very filthy songs I listened to too often when I was a kid. They're like burned into my brain.
Our youth pastor warned us that they would be, didn't he?
I think that's why I burned like $70 worth of CDs every other month, it seemed like.
And then bought 100
then
more.
Bought them back, yeah. Yeah, I mean, all this before the day of MP3. I could just be like, yep, deleted my hard drive.
Yeah, for real.
Go back and get them from Amazon. Anyway, that's not what people are here to listen to us talk about, Jared. So you're doing okay?
I'm doing well, man. I'm a soccer dad. I just got back from soccer with my kids.
Did you take them and bring them back in a minivan?
My wife did. I drove separate because I had to get a charger for my battery from my riding lawnmower.
Oh, fascinating. This episode brought to you by We Are Old.
We are old, and you should see my mower. I think it's older than you and I put together.
Okay. I mean, since we're just going completely boring to open up the episode here, today I stayed home to mow my yard because if I let it go much longer, it's going to be declared a wildlife preserve, and I won't be able to let it go any further.
Dude, mine is there right now.
Went to start my lawnmower. Key broke off in the ignition. True story. True stinking story. Sanctification meter went to almost totally bottomed out in that moment. But thankfully I live near my dad. So I was like, okay, cool. Just go up there and get dad's mower, drive it down to the house, deal with this later. Go up to get dad's mower, no gas. Go over to the little store near us, fill the mower up with gas. Come back, mower won't start.
Dude, I wish I could just follow you around today without you knowing and see all those things happen to you.
I think I radiated heat. I was so angry.
Oh, that would have made my day for real, man. If I could see the future, like I would just took off today. Well, I was off today. I would have just came down and hung out with you so I could see all that.
I was boiling furious. So, yeah, that's my day. Hey, but I'd rather talk to you about some pop culture stuff since that's the name on the billboard. You ready to get into that?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. So you know what the first segment is here, Jared. We're going to start talking about...
What you watching? What you watching? What you watching?
And Jared, what you been watching, buddy?
I've been watching The Office some.
Still? You're on that Office kick hard. I think that's like 3 episodes in a row.
Yeah, I started back at the beginning again.
Hey, can we pick a fight real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I actually had this. We had a young man and woman over who were doing premarital counseling last night, and we got into this conversation. Have you watched Parks and Rec?
Yeah, I've watched quite a bit of it, like maybe 4 seasons, something like that.
Okay, so here's reality. This is an objectively true statement. Parks and Rec is better than The Office.
No way.
100%. Yeah. So
I don't think so.
It made our guest furious when I said that. Here's my case. I don't necessarily think that Parks and Rec is better than the first 7 seasons of The Office. But if you take The Office as a whole, Parks and Rec is better. It actually does The Office better than The Office.
Really?
Yeah. The awkwardness is more awkward. The quirky characters are more quirky. Their lovableness is more lovable. And the comedy is just funnier.
Wow.
By the time you get to Robert California, the Office is in a death spiral and just nobody knew it.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So that's the fight I'm going to pick.
I like it.
At me. At Right Jeff. Come at me, bro.
Send all your hate mail to Jeff Wright. I disagree, man. I love The Office. I've watched Parks and Rec, but wasn't a huge fan. I mean, it had funny parts, and I love that character that what's his name?
Ron Swanson?
Ron Swanson.
Yeah. Yeah, Ron's awesome.
He's my favorite character on there, but he is.
I mean, you host a podcast with him.
That's right. That's right. He makes a lot of good statements too. A lot of true things that are true.
Absolutely does. Everything he says about the government.
That's right. That's right.
And meat. That's also true. Everything he says about meat.
Yeah, Yeah. Oh yeah, I disagree, man. I think The Office makes you more uncomfortable, and I think it is funnier. Actually, 30 Rock.
Not after Michael leaves. That's the thing. After Michael leaves, it's a completely less valuable show. And I don't think any season of The Office is as weak as season 1 of Parks and Rec. Mm-hmm. But even with the weakness of season 1 taken as a whole up against The Office as whole, those last seasons drag the average down so far that you got to give the crown to Parks and Rec. I mean, every episode will bust your gut funny, and there's times with The Office where like Christy loves it, my wife loves it, and we'll continue to watch it, and I'm just like, could you please turn this off because my brain is leaking out of my ear. It's just it's inane. Anyway, so I think you were going to say something positive though.
Oh, I laugh and laugh and laugh, and Amber gets tired of watching it, but she'll come in and she'll sit down while it's on, and then I'll catch her smiling and snickering. Yeah,
she's laughing at, not with.
She liked Parks and Rec too.
Yeah, that's a wise woman.
I enjoy comedy, and by comedy I mean the uncomfortableness of The Office. Kind of, I don't know. You feel nervous for them. Like they just make you feel uncomfortable throughout the whole thing. It works. That's kind of Parks and Rec too, right?
Yeah, and Parks and Rec did, in all honesty, the awkwardness, less and less as the show went on. Mm-hmm. The issue for me is that in those first 7 seasons, the awkwardness played out in The Office where I was like, oh my gosh, where's this going to go? And then after Michael left, basically, it played out with, can y'all just go away? And that's where I'm at on The Office, man.
Yeah, Michael was the best character. And like the guys they tried to raise up, again, Robert California, the Will Ferrell stuff should have been great, but it wasn't. I don't know why Andy didn't develop into an A-lister, as a television star after, what was that comedy special, or excuse me, those comedy movies he was in, that the honeymoon stuff where he and guys went out to Vegas, the Hangover series, yeah. I don't know why he didn't become an A-lister through that stuff or like take off with The Office as like, The Office 2.0 manager, but it just all fizzled out. Yeah, his character. I mean, that thing was basically built around Pam and Jim after Michael left. Right,
and that's, I think, part of the reason why I don't care for it as much, because it became a rom-com, and I just think that's tired. Or at least, there might be ways to do it that's not tired, but it wasn't what I saw in The Office. You kind of, in some ways, are like judging that mess up against what it used to be. Jim and Pam in a spinoff may have been better rather than just calling it The Office,
Yeah, I haven't watched enough of I've enjoyed it, but I still love The Office, man. But again, I don't know that I would recommend that to people. Depends on their conscience,
Sure. Anything else you're watching?
I watched the 3rd episode of Twilight Zone.
Did you? I've got it on my DVR, but I haven't watched it yet. It's like 45 minutes long, right?
Yeah. Well, okay. we can talk about that another time, man.
Well, let me tell you, or let me ask you rather. You tell me. Is what I meant to say. Is it better or worse than what you saw in the first 2 episodes?
I think better.
Okay, good deal. Well, it gives me a lot to look forward to then.
Yeah, we can talk about it next time in the next episode.
Sure, definitely. Anything else?
I watched an episode of 48 Hours.
Oh, did you now?
Dude,
I did not expect you to say that.
I really enjoy 48 Hours. I'll put it on every now and then in Dateline and all kinds of stuff like that.
Do you have to drink a Metamucil shake with it while you watch 48 Hours?
That is funny. You don't like real crime drama?
Oh, yeah, I do, actually. I do. I just don't ever watch 48 Hours. What was this one about?
This one was about... What was it about?
The need to stay regular in your old age?
No, it's not 60 Minutes.
I don't know, dude. 48 Hours demographic, I bet skews pretty high. I'd say it's pretty high.
It's... I can't remember. It was a night vision infrared camera thing.
What kind of camera? Infrared?
Oh
my gosh, that's so beautiful. Infrared.
Infrared, my bad.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful, Jared. I'm so glad that happened. I don't want to make fun of you. Is that a word like you've only read it and you've never heard it pronounced out loud? Because I do that stuff all the time. If I've read a word and nobody's ever used it in a conversation, I'm like, how do you pronounce that?
Yeah, dude, that's probably just me reading it.
It's infrared, yeah. But I'm just going to, you know how you told me you're going to make a ringtone out of me saying you're smarter and I want to be you on last episode? Yeah. Mine's just going to be you saying, I don't know how you pronounce that.
It's infrared.
Infrared. No, it's not. I'm sorry. It's infrared.
It's an infrared camera.
That's so good.
That's what they said, dude. That's what, on 48 Hours, that's what they called it.
Dude, you need to adjust your hearing aids. Get your hearing aids straightened out because they're messing with you.
He was using an infrared camera.
I think you dropped them in your Metamucil and put them back in, and they were all cobbled up.
Anyway, this dude, I'll tell you about it. This dude was out at night using his little new, I was going to say telescope. It ain't a telescope. What's those things on the gun? A scope. He was using his scope, and he was looking through it, and he saw somebody walking, and somehow he recorded them. And it turns out the next day it was reported that somebody was murdered, and so he thought he caught the killer on that camera. And so that's what it was about. And they ended up catching him, man, but it was morbid. It's just those shows reveal just how crazy sin is and how deceptive sin is. I mean, it's just nuts, and it's crazy how they stumble upon catching people, how police officers do sometimes.
Right.
They brought in a guy just to interview him about his friend. They thought his friend had done the crime, and it turned out this guy had. Like, it was just, they brought him in as a witness, and he ended up being the guilty one.
Yeah. There's nothing crazier than true life. I really do like true crime, and the stuff you read in true crime, you almost feel like, I think I've said this on the podcast before, if you read it in a book, you'd be like, that's not realistic, Yeah. But it turns out it's actually how history played out.
Oh, yeah. And when I watch those shows, man, like about half the time, I'm like, how did the jury not convict him? And the other half, I'm like, how did they convict him on such little evidence?
Yeah.
Like it just blows my mind, the disparity between those two realities.
100%. Well, I appreciate you walking us.
It's riveting, isn't it?
It is. It's fascinating.
What I've been watching is riveting.
The only thing I have been watching, and I mean, it eclipses everything actually I have watched this week. Did you see Notre Dame burning today?
I did. I thought you were going to say the NBA playoffs, but
no. I mean, I'm in. Don't get me wrong. I'm enjoying watching them, but I really feel like this year's first round is going to be all chalk, and so I don't have any expectation that anybody's going to upset anybody. So I'm watching it, lightly. But man, I was just riveted by the Notre Dame stuff today. It's so heartbreaking to watch that go up in flames.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's awful, man.
So I mean, I guess I'm potentially about to alienate like half our listeners, but I'm gonna throw something at you.
Okay.
I think our God, as we talk about in this podcast all the time, is a great storyteller, right?
Yep.
And he knows how to put imagery in his story. So the defining note of Notre Dame is tragedy. Maybe the most beautiful building ever constructed by human beings. Mm-hmm. St. Peter's, okay, one or two, but like it's in the very shortest list, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a monumental loss to Western culture, religious history, artistic achievement. That's the defining note. Mm-hmm. But having said that, our God, who's a good storyteller, knows how to use images. Is this image best interpreted as God's picture of what is happening to Western culture, or what is happening to the Roman Catholic Church under Pope Francis's leadership?
Oh, wow. Probably the latter, Pope Francis.
Yeah, it seems like it's particularly Catholic, right? I mean, I know it's French, and so that kind of messes up the analogy a little bit, but that's a Catholic Church burning from within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder if he'll stay, actually. But
I think he will. I mean, he is so clueless. Did you see that he had Benedict come out to write about the sexual scandal?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it's worth going to read. Benedict's been he's getting made fun of on social media because the analysis, the pithy analysis that Twitter produces, right, is that he's blaming everything that went wrong in the church's sexual scandal on the 60s.
Oh, my goodness.
But here's the thing, man. Benedict has a sharp theological mind. That was one of the things I really appreciated about his papacy. At least he knew what Catholicism was and where the boundaries were.
Uh-huh.
And if you go back and read some of his stuff when he was a cardinal, he also really knew how to read culture. And he called a lot of this stuff and found a lot of the roots. And he's right. The consequences of the upheaval of societal norms in the 60s are continuing to reverberate into 2020. And who knows how much further they'll go. But they began a process of eroding, human flourishing boundary markers. Mm-hmm. And we're just continuing to live in the breaking of the dam that came with their removal. Mm-hmm. And, you watch all these people who me, I consider myself a son of the Reformation. I'm not afraid to sign a confession that says the Pope is the Antichrist, right? The Second London.
Sure.
But, Ratzinger, Benedict, whatever you call him, on this stuff, he's right, and we should be listening to him. But Francis is using him as a way to not have to be bothered with it. He's treated the sexual scandal all along like it was some kind of conspiracy theory against the Catholic Church, and he trots Benedict out to deal with it because he won't. He is a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And I say that as a guy who obviously I'm going to be opposed to a pope, but even looking at like a pope as a cultural ally.
Yes.
He is awful. And
he is awful.
The best thing the Lord could do for the Roman Catholic Church would be to remove him.
Yeah.
I'm not calling for violence, certainly, or anything else. I'm just saying things aren't going to get better until Francis is no longer the pope.
Yeah, can they remove him? Can the Cardinals get together or something? Yeah,
man, but Francis he's a politician and he's part of this political group that basically conspired to get him elected. I don't think there's any way. He's clearly willing to ignore the biggest scandals in the church's recent history anyway. Mm-hmm. He's clearly willing to ignore countless faithful Roman Catholics who hold to traditional morals. I don't know if there's a mechanism left in the church that could fight his political alliances.
Well, I'm hoping that one day when he's gone, that the pendulum swings hard the other way with whoever's after him. Because the thing is, the morals and government. The Catholic Church has a ton of pull, and
we need them for the cultural issues.
Yes, we do. And honestly, I think if you got a pope in there who was willing to force discipline to those who are in favor of abortion, you think of how many pro-choice Democrats in politics there are. They're supposed to. They're supposed to be disciplined right now, and if somebody got in leadership in that group in the Roman Catholic Church that forced those under them as the vicar of Christ, which he's obviously not, but if he exercised that authority, man, you would see an exodus.
I think you would see the Joe Bidens of the world quickly become Anglo-Catholics and go to a liberal Anglican primate, basically, is what I think would happen there. But it would be better for the Roman Catholic Church for it to play out like that. I think we would see it. I think that and that alone could, based on the culture right now, I think that would produce enough of a wave to push it over the top to where abortion would be outlawed. Hey, man, there's great stuff happening in Texas right now and some other states. And so, praise the Lord, we may see it even with a pope that's tearing things down from the inside. So, we started talking about Notre Dame. I do think this is like imagery of something. The Lord either telling us this is what's happening to the West or this is what's happening to the Roman Catholic Church in your day. But the bottom line is this is a tragedy, and we're all diminished as a global population. Like the world is a little bit lesser when Notre Dame is destroyed. I did see some sweet clips. Like, I mean, people are just programmed to resonate with things that look like holy places. Did you see the group of people outside singing Ave Maria?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it was, again, like theologically, you have to set that aside. Like theologically, that's a train wreck. But the fact that they're recognizing that something beautiful and transcendent, or at least reflective of the transcendent, is being lost, is just super rare.
Yeah. It is rare. It is rare.
Yeah. So, I mean, thoughts and prayers. I don't know in what ways, I don't even know who to think about needing care for the loss of Notre Dame, except that there's probably someone out there. It's at the time of this recording, I guess it's still slightly possible this was some act of terrorism as we're recording, but it seems to be a fire that was produced in an accident, connected to the renovations that are taking place at Notre Dame. I think I've used like 7 different pronunciations so far. So if you're keeping score out there, let me know how many I use. There is somebody out there tonight or there may be more than one, but there's at least someone out there tonight who thinks he's the one or she's the one who set the fire at Notre Dame, And there's somebody out there who thinks if I had just went back and double checked, or I had just went and told them not to do X, Y, Z, that person's out there. You've got that guy. He's a Roman Catholic priest who's the head architect. You've got people who are in curatorial roles for Notre Dame. I mean, man, there's a lot of people out there right now who are deeply, deeply hurt. And I hope there's someone watching them, because particularly the guy who thinks, or the woman who thinks they set the blaze or they did the thing that led to the blaze. I can't imagine the kind of pain they're in right now.
Oh yeah. And there's no, I don't know if they figure out who it is. I assume there'll be charges depending, right?
Well, if it's an accident, no. But the thing I really hope is that they don't release the person's name. I don't want to know that, and I hope nobody knows that name. That is just something that history should not have access to. Yeah. If it's an accident, if it's a terrorist, if it's something like that, because we're seeing European churches. I think I read that like 2 European churches are desecrated a day, which sounds crazy. I didn't track it down, but like as Europe continues to secularize and then paganize, that's going to continue to happen. We saw in Norway historic churches being burned by the black metal community there back in I think it was the 90s. This stuff's going to keep happening, but I think right now it seems like this was an accident. And if it was an accident, just say a team of restorers or something. Don't single out individuals.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. It's awful though. I mean, it's sad all the way around.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all diminished, man. I really do mean that. And you just wonder, like, with the extent of the damage, will there be enough money chipped in? France was paying for like 2/3 of the renovation of the cathedral anyway. And I think I read the Roman Catholic Church was having a hard time hustling up their third.
Oh, wow.
And that was just renovation. I mean, what happens when you have to start rebuilding?
How was the Roman Catholic Church having a hard time coming up with a third?
I don't know, man. I just read that they thought they initially could fundraise it through European donors and realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to take place. And so they started going to America saying, we need y'all to chip in too. And I don't know where that stood. I think this will probably, watching that fire will probably provoke people to give. But the need now is so much more pronounced. And those famous rose windows, I was reading, I think it was Rod Dreher. He said some of that goes back to the time of Dante. So it was begun in 1170 and completed like 100 years later and then added on to over the centuries. But they were specifically saying on a YouTube video I watched that we're not entirely sure how those rose windows were made anymore. They're so old, we've forgotten the technique.
Wow.
And it's just incredible what we've lost.
Man. That's awful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's weird to think, but there was an organization taking up money to fund restoration. It's weird for me to think that I would give money to a French Roman Catholic cathedral restoration project, but I may. I may.
Yeah. That's interesting, man.
Yeah. Well, that's a down note. You got anything else to talk about on What You Watching?
No, I think that's it, buddy.
All right, man. Well, we will bring it to a close, and that will put us into our second world-famous segment.
So sorry to interrupt.
Jared, I got several things to throw at you. One is an update from last week's episode where we talked about the rise of streaming services and how, basically we're all returning to the pre-cord cutter price points with all the different streaming services.
Yeah.
Did you see that Disney announced their pricing?
I did not.
$6.99 a month.
That is low, man. We'll buy that for sure.
Yeah, I think we will too. Do you think they're trying to cut Netflix's throat, or are they trying to just wedge themselves into Netflix's market?
I think both. I mean, I don't think it would hurt their feelings if Netflix was gone,
Yeah. Well, let me throw a couple projects they've announced already. This sounds crazy. So The Simpsons, because Walt Disney recently acquired Fox, The Simpsons will only stream on the Disney Plus streaming service. They have announced they are developing a series called The Mandalorian, which I guess is connected to Boba Fett, but it's part of the Star Wars universe.
Uh-huh.
And they described it as Clint Eastwood in the Star Wars universe, which is like, take my money. I'm there.
Oh, yeah.
They are developing a Hawkeye television show, I guess. And Jeremy Renner is going to star in it.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That is awesome. Yeah, I'll watch that.
They're talking about a Hulk and She-Hulk series that Mark Ruffalo is slotted to star in.
She-Hulk. I've never really... Have you read She-Hulk stuff?
Yeah, I have. She-Hulk is, I think most of the time, she's a cousin of Bruce Banner, and she got a blood donation from him when her life was in danger. And so it permanently transformed her into the She-Hulk, but she retained her intelligence. And she's an interesting character. She's a lawyer and, kind of fights crime on both fronts. But because she lives permanently in the alter ego state, she becomes a celebrity and stuff. The problem with She-Hulk, and why I gave up reading anything about her, is that she became hypersexualized. Like, she was a really sexually aggressive character. And I just, cool, man, that's not what I'm coming to comic books for, and I just pieced out on it. But the idea of, she's permanently transformed and she lives in public as She-Hulk and has a legal career and stuff, that's all interesting fodder for story. If they do something like that, I'll definitely watch it. If they turn her into what I checked out in the comics was, I don't care if Mark Ruffalo's in it, who, I really like Mark Ruffalo. I'm sure you do too. But it's just not going to be enough to make me watch that kind of dreck. And then the last one they've announced is a Rogue One prequel series that Alan Tudyk is going to be back for. And if you remember, he was the guy who played the droid in Rogue One.
Okay.
So that everybody coming out of Rogue One was like, why'd they kill the droid? That was the best part of them. Which, don't get me wrong, I really liked Rogue One. I liked it much better than The Last Jedi. But everybody's like, why'd you kill the droid? He was the best part of the movie. And it looks like we're going to get a chance to spend some more time with him.
All those sound great, man.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna be buying this. On less happy returns and less optimistic news, did you pay attention to the box office this week?
No,
Well, Shazam, the subject of this episode, it held on to the number one spot. It brought in $25 million, so like a little less than half of what it got in opening weekend.
Oh, wow.
A movie that I'm totally unfamiliar with called Little was number 2 at 15.5. But the real shocker is that Hellboy opened at number 3 with just $12 million.
Oh, wow.
And then Missing Link, which you and I have talked about how terrible I thought that movie looked, and I think you were in the same mind state. I think I just invented that. It had the worst opening, one of the worst openings ever for a movie that releases in 3,000 theaters. It opened at number 9 with $5.8 million.
I wonder how much money they spent on that thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd like to know too. I mean, it's got some big voice acting in it.
Yeah. It's got the dude who was on Chipmunks, right?
Oh, I was thinking about Hugh Jackman. Isn't that the guy who does most of it?
I think that's the dude, the the explorer in the movie based on the preview, and then the comedian, the missing link thing is the guy who's in Chipmunks. I can't think of his name.
Well, I didn't know about Chipmunks, but it's Zach Galifianakis, isn't it?
Oh, is it? I didn't realize it was Zach. Oh,
I think so.
I thought it was the dude with the glasses.
That guy. That narrowed it down.
In the Chipmunks. Gosh.
I have no idea, man. I'm sorry. I'm picking on you. But I mean, dude, so Pet Sematary didn't set the world on fire. Dumbo fell in the dumpster. Hellboy has now fallen in the dumpster. And Missing Link is like beneath the dumpster in the sewer. Hollywood is not having a good week.
It's David Wellams. It's not Zach Galifianakis.
Are you sure? Are you sure you're not confusing that with Stephen Wellham?
Oh my goodness!
Theology nerd alert.
That's funny.
Okay, well I sit corrected then. Either way, nobody made any money off of that one.
Okay,
and it looked awful. So I'm glad it's suffering. I have Schadenfreude when bad movies get what they deserve. Did Missing Link look to you like sort of a transgenderism delivery vehicle?
I didn't see that based on the previews, but maybe I just wasn't looking good enough.
Yeah, I mean, this idea that like he's a creature who doesn't belong in traditional society, and I think the creature is voice acted by someone who's male, but he adopts a female name. It just started raising my cautionary, radar. Like, beware.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Shazam made some more money. It fell off 53%. I looked up statistically. Pet Sematary fell off 59%. Maybe it was just pretty weather. Nobody wanted to go to the movie, but it's not. It's not shaping up as a banner spring. Of course, Avengers Endgame is going to land and take everyone's money, but right now, there's not a lot of good news coming out of the box office.
Yeah, and there's a lot of competition, man. I mean, there's so much to watch and so much to do. There's too many things.
Most people, I think most people probably, they start their entertainment week by saying, "Is there a new Pop Culture Coram Deo episode?"
That's true.
And after that, who knows where they're going to go? Maybe they're going to go see a movie. Maybe they're going to stream some stuff. Maybe they're going to go to Redbox. But we leave such a wake. I can see how Hollywood's having a hard time keeping up.
Yes. I think that's it. People come here first to figure out what they're going to watch. So 48 hours is going to get an uptick.
This episode brought to you by Metamucil. Thankful to have Metamucil come on as an advertiser and supporter of the Pop Culture Coram Deo podcast. You know what Metamucil is? It's drinkable fiber.
Oh, is it really? See, I don't even know what it is. How do you know what it is? You had it?
I have cared for senior members of my family. How about that? Okay. How about that? I pulled the good guy card on you.
You did. You did. I don't even know what to say. Oh, let me tell you. Speaking of, so I stuck my foot in my mouth, and it reminded me. I did my taxes last night, dude. So I had to enter my wife's license in order to try to e-file.
Mm-hmm.
And I get her license, and it came out of my mouth before I realized what I said. But I said, "Are you pregnant in this picture?"
Mm.
And it was too late.
Oh my word, Jay. Oh my gosh.
And she said, "No, do I look pregnant in that picture?" And anyway, I was just dead.
Dude, what is that thing that samurais do when they fall on their sword? Is it Bushido or seppuku or whatever? Dude, you should have pulled out a sword and just fell forward. Like,
I wish
like Saul and Jonathan, man, just fall on your sword and die right there.
I wish I could have instantly went to sleep or something, like just fell over and because I was on it. Like the first thing when I first saw the picture, I was thinking, "Oh, she must have been pregnant with Jude," but it was like a year and 2 months after. So anyway,
you know that story in King David's life where, like, I think he's running from Absalom and he starts faking like he's a crazy person and drooling on himself and stuff.
Yeah,
that's 100% the play you should have ran, man. Like, honey, take me to the ER. I think I'm having a stroke. Just you gotta resort to desperate measures at that point.
It was bad. And then she's beautiful. She's not. I mean, she's little. She's not. Mm-hmm. It was just a stupid question that came out of my mouth.
Yes, sir. Everything you just said is true.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Any listeners, men, learn from me, and women, I'm sorry for what I said.
What's that cliche? Like, better to keep your mouth shut and not reveal that you're a fool than open it and let everybody remove all doubt or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think you're a fool, dude, but in that moment, that was not. You were basically having the husband version of what's happening at the box office for Hollywood right now.
That's exactly right.
Not a lot of good moves.
It was the dirty taxes, man. Government getting me.
Yeah. Hashtag taxation is theft. Support your local libertarians. Yeah, dude. It is crazy what we have to deal with in April. All right, man. Well, the last thing, I'm kind of burying the lead here, but I thought we'd save it to the last. We got a new Star Wars trailer.
Yes.
Let's just recap for listeners who didn't hear our episode on The Last Jedi. Is it fair to say that we hated that movie?
Yeah. I mean, not hated. I wouldn't say hated. I liked it better than you did.
Okay. Well, I definitely hated it.
It's because you're I don't know, you know way too much about Star Wars. Like,
you're right. That's true. I'm like depressingly nerdish about Star Wars, and by far out of every pop culture franchise, I've spent more time with it than any other set of stories. So you're right.
So I'm blissfully unoffended by The Last Jedi.
Man, they threw away Luke Skywalker. They told all the fans like myself who were committed and paying attention to like go take a long walk off a short cliff and. Yeah, that movie is you hear some movies that are like a love letter. That movie is a hate letter. It's a hate tweet to the most committed members of the fan base, and it looks like they're trying to retcon some of that. What do you think about the trailer?
I thought it was it looked like they were trying to undo The Last Jedi.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think even the title, like The Rise of Skywalker, is no. We're sorry. We're sorry we took a dump on the Skywalker legacy.
He's going to rise from the dead.
Yeah. And I mean, just some things I noticed. So listen, friend, if you don't want to have a trailer spoiled, which by the way, I'm totally sympathetic. I just couldn't help but watch this one because of that aforementioned Star Wars fandom. It looks like we're getting Kylo Ren and the helmet back. Mm-hmm. It looks like we're getting sweet lightsaber battles again. And it sounded a whole lot like Emperor Palpatine laughing at the back end of that trailer.
Yeah, but was it? I thought it was Skywalker.
Well, Skywalker is the one doing the voiceover, but it sounded to me like right when he says at the very end of the trailer, no one is ever really gone. The next thing we hear is what sounded to me again like Palpatine laughing.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know, my interest is piqued. I would be there to watch that thing. Mm-hmm. I keep reading online that the powers that be that control Star Wars think that there's Star Wars fatigue and they're going to slow down the movies they're releasing and whatnot. It's just a classic case in my mind of Hollywood executives not being able to read the room. I don't think there's Star Wars fatigue. If anything, like my kids are chomping at the bit for more Star Wars content. They love it. Mm-hmm. I think we have fatigue for terrible stories that throw away what we loved about the original movies. Yeah, we're all tired of that. Thanks. Tell Ryan Johnson, thanks, but no thanks on more of that. But, give us some stuff that says, hey, what happened in the first three movies? I say the first three, the classic trilogy, the original trilogy, that stuff mattered. And the characterization that developed in those characters over that time, that's going to be reflected in the new stories. If you give us that, I don't think there's any fatigue. Even if you use that to like hand the world off to the next generation, basically, hey, we came, we did what we needed to in our era. Now it's your time to make use of it. You can have a handing of the baton. I think people love Rey, but you can't do it by saying you were stupid to love the previous generation, So
yeah,
you want me to climb off my soapbox? And
yeah.
I'll take off my stormtrooper outfit now and stop embarrassing everybody.
Tell them, hey, everybody, go if you want to hear Jeff get upset for an hour or so, go listen to our episode on The Last Jedi.
Yeah, that was a bit of a rager. It's not a good place there. You can also see our write-up on pathos.com.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, man. Well, that's about the end of So Sorry to Interrupt for me, unless you got something else you want to talk about.
No, that's it, man.
All right. Well, it is time to pay the bills. Our feature review for this episode, which is the 2019 DC Extended Universe phenomenon, Shazam. You ready to pull the curtain on that one, Jared?
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. What we do here, if you're not familiar, is we go through and analyze the story of the movies we look at in comparison to the story that God is telling about his son, Jesus Christ. And we're going to do that with Shazam. But before we get started there, we're going to read the synopsis, and then Jared's going to start the conversation about a conscience warning for those Christians who may want to see this movie but need to be alerted about anything that might trouble them morally in the movie. But man, after that, after I read specifically the synopsis, we are in full-blown spoiler territory. And if you continue listening from that point on, we assume that you're happy to have the plot details spoiled or discussed. If that's not you, we really appreciate you listening so far. Hit pause, go watch this movie, come back and resume the episode. We'll be here waiting on you, and you can pick back up and enjoy the rest of the episode without having the details ruined. So we good to go here, Jared, on the synopsis?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go to IMDb again. They do a good job. You tell me what we're missing. Here's the IMDb synopsis for Shazam. We all have a superhero inside us. It just takes a little bit of magic to bring it out. I actually think that's a Joel Osteen quote.
That's funny right there.
In Billy Batson's case, by shouting out one word, Shazam, this streetwise 14-year-old foster kid can turn into the grown-up superhero Shazam.
That's
Anything
good.
I'm missing there, bud?
No, that looks good. Sounds good.
It doesn't sound good to me because it's stupid. It's stupid that his name is the wizard's name. They initially, they've updated IMDb since then, but I went after watching this movie premiere, and they had Zachary Levi, who plays the hero. They had him listed as Shazam or Champion Shazam, and they had Jamon Honsu, who plays the wizard, as Wizard Shazam. Yeah, I've already been ranting on this, but dadgummit, just call him Captain Marvel. Fans are smart enough to know that Marvel has a Captain Marvel and DC has a Captain Marvel. And if you're going to make some kind of change, don't give two characters the same name, okay? Please. I'm done. I'm done ranting about that stupid decision, but I needed to get that off my chest.
That's good.
All right, man. Conscience warning. What would you highlight for a thoughtful listener that they might want to be on guard about going into this movie? He
goes to a, so what can I call Zachary Levi's character, Jeff?
Call him Shazam. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I've done that to you. And it's kind of you to be like, don't tick off the psycho. Just call him Shazam. We're living in a crazy world, so let's do it.
Shazam goes to a gentleman's club a couple times. They act nonchalantly about it, like it's funny. I think there's some derogatory terms about women's bodies that's said, and there's some other language, and there's some really scary scenes like that. There's a scene in The Office when the 7 deadly sins go in there and clean house. That is one of the scariest scenes I've seen in a while in a scary movie.
You mean in a superhero movie?
I mean, just in a scary movie. I thought it was
okay.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. Good grief! Like smoke you couldn't see, and all of a sudden you see like 10 people trying to get out of that room, and then they disappear.
Like their bodies hit the glass, like it's a frosted glass, but you see like bodies slammed up against it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I want to talk about in the notes section. So there is quite a bit of violence and scares here. But if you would serve me, let's talk about that more fully here in just a minute.
Sure.
You said they go to a strip club twice. We don't see anything inside there, but we know what it is. There's some foul language. There's some legitimately scary stuff. I think some Christians aren't cool with the portrayal of magic. Mm-hmm. You can't get away from it in this. This is all about some magic.
Yeah.
Obviously there's going to be some violence, although it's pretty cartoony, all things considered.
Sure. CG.
Yeah. And like one time, Shazam catches a falling bus by holding the windshield.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, okay, this is a cartoon for real. So I think those are the conscience issues. You can always check Plugged In for more specific accounting of, you know, foul language and things like that. But those are the ones that stand out to me and Jared. I'll consider the conscience warning wrapped up here. So you brought up the fact that this movie is legitimately scary, and I'm 100% with you. In fact, it has so much scary stuff in it that I wonder what the reaction is going to be from parents who expect to go see a cartoonish superhero movie, and they don't do their homework, and they show up and they see the 7 deadly sin monsters doing crazy stuff. I wonder if there won't be pushback from, you know, moms looking for an afternoon movie to watch with their kids, and they don't realize how stinking scary it's going to be.
Yeah, I wondered that too. Like I had read about the Gentleman's Club junk and decided not to take my kids, but the scary stuff would have warped them too, like messed with them. Yeah,
so I knew that after I watched it that I wouldn't take my 10-year-old because he can read and say, Dad, what's a gentleman's club and why is that funny? And I didn't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
But then the kid of mine who's most psyched to see this movie is my 6-year-old. And he, because we held him back from starting school, he is chomping at the bit to read. He recognizes a lot of letters, but he's not quite reading. So I won't have to deal with that with him. But I told him, this thing is so scary, I think it will give you nightmares. And if we go watch it, you have to agree that I can put my hand over your eyes at any point and you not try to squirm around and see around what I'm blocking your eyes from seeing. And he was okay with that. I think there's a sweet spot, I guess is what I'm saying, with kids where you could be like, yeah, we're not going to deal with the strip club stuff, and I'll just shield you from the super scary stuff. But, you know, even before the 7 deadly sins show up, there's a scene where Dr. Savannah, who's the bad guy, he's working with a doctor trying to track down all these different people who had an encounter with the wizard. And he finally figures it out. He writes these magic glyphs on a door, and the doctor touches the door and she turns to ash. And I was like, that was super scary. So the guy who made this is David Sandberg. He's a Swedish director. He's got legit horror chops. Like he in Sweden was making shorts and doing like advertising and animation. And he made a short called Lights Out that some Hollywood company saw and said, let's do a feature film. And so he went straight from like never working on a movie set to being the director of a full-fledged horror movie. Horror, I watch a lot of horror movies. Lights Out's a pretty good horror movie as a one-off. Then he got the helm of the Conjuring universe's Annabelle sequel. You know, I didn't care for the first Annabelle movie, but he did a really good job with Annabelle the Conjuring, the Creation. Yeah, thank you. And I just wonder if he doesn't know how to dial it down. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he knows how to be super scary, but he doesn't know how to be slightly scary.
He's got a lot of good shorts. I mean, you can go find them on YouTube.
Yeah. He's one of the examples of like Hollywood people going for non-traditional creators and it really working. But this guy knows how to make stuff scary, and I don't know that he knows how to throttle it, and it comes through loud and clear here. Another note here, and I guess I'm leading with some stuff that's going to sound negative. I was much more happy about this movie than I thought I would be. Previous listeners know I have a real affection for the Captain Marvel character that dates back to Fawcett comics, and I don't care for what has been done with the character in recent days by a DC writer named Jeff Johns, but I knew this movie was based on Jeff Johns' story, so I thought I'm going to hate this from go. I enjoyed this much more than I thought I would, but there are 3 negatives that I guess I want to talk about in film notes. The first just being that I think some parents are going to be surprised by how scary it is, what we just got in talking about. Have you seen the buzz around this movie that it's got the first gay superhero in it?
No,
Yeah, this is, I don't think it's been officially confirmed, but to give the ending of the movie away, we're fully in spoiler territory. Billy Batson, who becomes Shazam, finds out that his family members, the adopted the foster family that he's a part of, the other kids there, I think there's 6 of them, that if they say Shazam, they become versions of Shazam as well, and they have superpowers, and they get their own moment in the sunlight as superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of those kids is played by Jovan Armand, and the character he's playing is Pedro Pena. He's just another one of the foster kids living at the foster home Billy does. And at one point, trying to escape from some danger, Billy, as Shazam, teleports the group of kids away from danger, and they're going to go to the first place he can think of. And it's that strip club we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids come pouring out of the gentleman's club, and one of the older female characters, the oldest young lady in that foster home, says, "Really, that's the only place you could think of?" And so they're, again, it's played for yucks, but Pedro turns to another one of the foster siblings and says, "It's not my thing."
Yeah.
And so everybody has seized on that and said, "Oh, it's the first gay superhero character. That, whatever version of Shazam that Pedro turns into, he's going to be gay." And you can find lots of headlines about this on lots of websites since this movie came out. I'm sure you noticed that. What did you think when you heard him deliver that line?
I didn't know. I mean, because it's Hollywood, man. I assumed that,
Yeah.
I assumed exactly what they're saying. But it's just because it's Hollywood, and this movie has not been. I want to talk about this, about how, even the 7 deadly sins, one of them's lust, and the fact that they're going to a strip club and this guy's supposed to be Mr. Moral, it's just ridiculous. But
yeah, well, so I'm with you. I heard that and I thought that's probably setting him up to be gay.
Yeah.
But when I was thinking about this movie afterwards, it just overwhelmed me with depression that we are at a place as a society that assumes a kid who gets the chance is going to go in the most misogynistic and sexist fashion possible, ogle women taking their clothes off for money, right? Like, as a culture, we assume that's how kids will act. And I do not deny that there are kids who will act that way. But we just assume it's a blanket, right?
Yeah.
And we also assume that the only kind of kid who would look at a gentleman's club, know what was going on inside of there. I say a kid, a male kid who would, know what was happening inside a gentleman's club and look at that and say, "It's not my thing." We're at a point where the only category we have for that is that guy's gay.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Notre Dame burning. Our culture is a dumpster fire.
Mm-hmm.
That, it would probably be seen as too unrealistic for a guy like Pedro to say, that is just not the kind of relationship I want to have with women and sexuality. Not my thing. Mm-hmm. That can't be that he's got a different moral framework. Can't be that he has seen through, again, sexism and misogyny and rejected it. It's got to be that he's gay.
Yeah.
It drives me up the wall, man. And it says something about what a dark, dark place we're in with human sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we've talked about this before. I feel like we have, but C.S. Lewis has this analogy. I think it's in Mere Christianity, where he says, imagine you go to a planet and there are theaters where people in isolated booths watch as a cover is slowly lifted to reveal a piece of steak. And he says, if you can imagine that world and visiting that world, would you not immediately conclude that something had gone terribly wrong with their view of food and eating? And he makes the analogy to sexuality and how we consume sex outside of marriage. And like often is the case, C.S. Lewis really nails us. Pedro Pena is another example of that. We're just so broken, we can't think of anybody who wouldn't like a strip club as a male except a gay guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I think if I were a gay person, I would be offended by that. I'm being defined by rejecting the basest form of interacting with feminine sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
It's just frustrating.
Oh yeah. This is the mainstream, right? This is, it's expected. There's no self-control expected. There's no, nothing like human dignity. I mean, like you're talking about earlier at the very beginning of the episode with, we're living off of the 60s where all those boundaries are gone,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just assumed that, that everybody's going to be immoral. They're going to be the product of their appetites, right? Instead of exercising self-control or
practicing virtue.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, as Christians, we have good reasons and resources to reject strip clubs, even to reject the label gentleman's club.
Oh, yeah.
But in a post-Me Too world, anybody who cares to pay attention without interacting with an actual strip club can pretty quickly find out that these kind of institutions feed on the exploitation of vulnerable women. They're often linked to human trafficking. The supposed virtues of our culture in the moment, where women are to be valued apart from objectification, strip clubs run right in the face of that. But again, for all of the high-minded public talk about having a higher view of women, we all run to see this movie where the only person who thinks a strip club is not all that appealing is the gay dude. That's cool. That's cool, Hollywood. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, it's not high. I mean, Hollywood's version of a high view of women is whatever a woman wants to do, she should be able to do,
Yeah, but again, I'm going to point out that strip clubs run up against that because they're often employing women who feel like they have no other economic options, or they've literally been kidnapped and forced into human trafficking and kept doped up so they'll dance.
Yeah.
I mean, any set of ethical presuppositions you come at, even the world's, more empty ones, this is stupid. This is deeply stupid and hypocritical and self-contradictory. But you just pull up a Google search of first gay superhero and people are celebrating it as if it's progress.
Crazy. Evil.
And calling evil good and good evil. I said C.S. Lewis nailed us. Isaiah, by the inspiration of the Spirit, did a long time before he did. The last one, and again, I know we're starting off negative here. I think there's a lot to celebrate about this movie. But did you feel like this movie had to take hard shots at the traditional family in order to set up the goodness of the foster family?
I didn't take it that way. I didn't take it that way at all. I thought they were trying to create a traditional family. I mean, you got a man and a woman with a bunch of kids,
Yeah. Well, so you may be right, but let me throw why I'm asking that at you and see if there's any credibility to it, okay?
Sure.
So the first people we meet in this movie is the family that produces the bad guy. And the bad guy's a kid riding down the road with his older brother and his father. And they're just belittling him on this car ride. You remember that?
Yeah.
And they're tormenting him, telling him he's not good enough. Everything's his fault. Eventually, there's this major car wreck. It wounds the dad deeply. Both the dad and the brother assign the guilt to him. Savannah gets taken into the wizard's cavern, succumbs to temptation, hears from the wizard, "You're not good enough." And the combination of the two basically set him on a path of evil, right? Mm-hmm. But did you notice that in the car ride, as they're setting up, look how awful Savannah's family life was, that the dad and the brother are telling him to stop blaming people for your problems and toughen up? Mm-hmm. That struck me as so weird because one of the things I think dads are supposed to help sons do is to take self-responsibility and to not be driven by the emotional whims of their heart. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, out of all the ways you can show a toxic masculinity or a toxic fatherhood, you reach into insulting him basically with weaponized versions of good counsel that fathers should do. I mean, if you read Proverbs, that's kind of a summary of some of the major themes of Proverbs.
Yeah.
Be wise, take responsibility for yourself. Don't be driven by your passions, but choose the path of wisdom. And that's what's in the mouth of the people who create the monster. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I don't know. I just didn't take it as them scolding what the father was saying, but how he was saying it.
I just don't think you can separate those because that's all we get him saying. Like how he was saying it, yeah, you're right. But there's also the content, and we don't have anything else. We don't have him being like, stop caring about people or, other monstrous things he could have said, right? Like people are here to either hold you back or help you get ahead. Like he could be doing all that, but that's not what they picked. They picked take responsibility, don't be governed by your passions. I don't know. So I'll put that there. Then I'm going to come back to the backside of the movie where Billy Batson has been on this quest to find his mother.
Wait. Now that you point that out, whenever it's interesting because when they had the car wreck, the brother turned around and places the blame on the kid instead of the dad.
Yes, exactly. And the dad does too.
Right.
Because he can't like talk, but he's like staring needles through Savannah and like trying to articulate what we all assume to be. Mm-hmm. You screwed this up.
Like hypocrisy, I guess, is the major point there.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, then on the backside, this is different from every comic book version of the character I've read. And I will confess that I gave up on Jeff Johns' initial run called The Curse of Shazam. But I have been reading his new set of stories that started coming out at the beginning of 2019 or just the end of 2018. But in every one of the stories that I have read, classically, Billy has been this virtuous, upright, pure-spirited young man. And he ends up in foster homes with some rough characters. So he runs away and he's living homeless, right? Mm-hmm. But his parents are presented as figures of virtue, that it really is a tragedy that Billy has been orphaned. And even in Jeff Johns' material, I don't think we have anything comparable to the movie's scene where Billy finds his mom and realizes she totally checked out on him and is self-centered and a loser. And I just thought, why was that incorporated? Because like the quest to find his mom could easily be a driving force in his life that doesn't have to be resolved in this movie. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And like you could even have him come to realize that the family that's right in front of him is worth loving and valuing even as he continues to look for his mom. And there's nothing inherently different about this movie if you do that.
Right.
But they specifically took the time to say, no, his real mom sucks.
Yeah.
And so when I see the thing at the beginning and then I see the addition of the thing about his birth mother, I think this movie is pretty hard on just, the traditional family created through offspring, procreation. Mm-hmm. Do you think I'm stretching too far here? Feel free to tell me if so.
I don't know. This is the first time hearing of this. I did not think that whenever I first watched it. And I don't know. I don't know what to think about that.
There's not really a good traditional family in this movie.
Right, but there's not yeah, you're right.
I mean, it kind of feels to me like Jordan Peele saying there's no good white people in Get Out. It's not there by accident.
The thing with foster kids, though, like in most movies, there's not a positive reason why the kid's in the foster system.
No, that's true. But like even within this movie, you've got all these kids who seem to be pretty much thriving in the home of this foster family.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I mean, I didn't need, Mary or Freddie to find out their parent was a loser and self-centered to like think that they could credibly thrive and value the family that had been created by this foster parent.
Sure.
This set of foster parents. And so, I don't know, it caught me as weird.
Yeah.
Well, listener, feel free to contact us at PCCDpod on Twitter, Reddit, PCCDpod@gmail.com. Tell me I'm crazy, or tell me if you think there's some legs to this thing I'm suspicious about in this movie. Okay, well, enough conspiracy theory for me. Let's get into our proper analysis. Guys, if this is your first time with us, we look at these movies, as I've already mentioned, in comparison to the story that God's telling in history about Jesus Christ. And that story has 4 acts. There is creation, where God creates everything good. There's the fall, where God watches all of his good creation choose the path of rebellion. And in that rebellion that is known as sin, bring death and suffering into the world. But God remains committed to his purposes, and so he deploys an agent of redemption, his perfect son, Jesus Christ, who takes the weight of sin onto his shoulders, dies under God's judgment against sin, rises triumphantly from the grave, and begins the work of bringing all things into submission, first to himself and then to his Father. God rewards this with the creation of a bride for his Son, known as the church. And through this process, we get a better world. We get a glorified new world. And so we have the fourth stage, glorification. We're going to run Shazam through those filters. And so, Jared, my first question to you would be, what is creational goodness in the world of Shazam?
So creational goodness, I guess it's today's world. And very similar, good men doing good. I mean, there are good people. And I think you and I would affirm that as well. I mean, it is and besides the magic, it's an accurate picture of what, like any superhero story, there's evil and good men fight evil.
Right. So it's a good thing to oppose evil. Yeah.
Right.
There's quite a bit of stuff to connect with and enjoy in this movie that I think Christians can be delighted to celebrate. So friendship matters in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it already, but this is a very pro foster care movie. And I'm sure you do in your church. We have a couple people in our church whose family has a long legacy of caring for the needy and the vulnerable through foster caring. And I really feel like there's some of the sweetest saints in the entire church, not just mine, but like people who are willing to foster are such a tremendous blessing because their hearts are subject to being torn out week by week, month by month. They'll bring a child in, try to love it well. That child could be gone or they could be there for years. And they're just kind of constantly always living life with their heart out on the table, waiting for somebody to whack it. And this movie sets that kind of self-sacrificing care up front and says, look, this is really beautiful and something to be celebrated. So, anything else we're missing there? I mean, this is basically a moral world that recognizes that people who exploit others for their own ends, people who seek revenge, are wicked, and then the good people are the ones who are going to stand against them. That's pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, what about fallenness?
Fallenness happens when, with great power comes great responsibility, and when people with the power to do something don't do it, that's the fall.
Yeah, so you're thinking about like when Shazam, with all his superpowers, chooses to go buy beer, or hit on women, or specifically to like just go to the park and try to get people to pay him for selfies.
Right.
Yeah. I think Savannah represents vengeance. He's given his life over to showing his father that he was wrong about him, that Savannah's father was wrong about Savannah, even that the wizard was wrong about him, and to take what was denied him as a gift. His life ambition is to take it by force and have it nonetheless. And so self-centeredness, vengeance, those are the ways fallenness enters into this film. You mentioned that scene in the office. It's pretty dramatic the way Savannah takes his vengeance. It's pretty dramatic when he snatches his brother up and just throws him out the window of a skyscraper. But then we have all that stuff you were talking about where basically these monsters who Savannah has brought with him, known as the Seven Deadly Sins, they destroy everybody in the boardroom. And the last image we have before the door closes on the boardroom finally is the demonic manifestation, I think, of greed.
Yeah.
Walking over to the father who's he's an invalid. He can't run away, and begin to pummel him. And like the camera stays on that creature beating that old man for a long time. So, again, fallenness, but thankfully this movie says fallenness is a problem. It's to be opposed. This movie recognizes evil for what it is. What would you say? What would you say the presentation of redemption is in Shazam?
When people who have the power to fight evil do.
Yeah, when they bind together to use their powers.
Right.
Yeah. So Billy learns to embrace the foster family, even as the foster family embraces him. He rejects the self-centered way he'd been making use of his powers, takes responsibility for those who are weaker than him, and saves the day. What's the glorified better world that awaits on the far side of that, Jared?
Evil's defeated. The 7 deadly sins are back in their cages or prisons, and there's a lot of Shazams.
Yeah, that's right. Who can't say their own name. Hey, who saved you? The guy with a lightning bolt on his chest. What are we missing here, man? That was pretty simple, pretty quick. Is it just because this movie is, I don't want to say it's simplistic, but kind of like a comic book. It paints with bright colors, right?
Yeah, it's a trope movie, you know? I like it, but it's with great power comes great responsibility, and that's what the movie's about.
Yeah. Well, guys, that is how we chop up the movie and start doing our analysis. We try to put that back together, though, by asking a series of questions to kind of draw out the best that's available to us as believers looking at this story, if there is anything. And so the first story we ask is, what is the story of this movie? And we want to work really hard to get that right. And we hope we've done that, kind of in the big themes we talked about through our worldview analysis. Jared, the second question there is, where am I? And we want to see the style and shape of the imaginary world. Where are you at in this movie?
I identified with I think the most moral person in the movie is the foster mom and dad.
Oh, okay.
So I want to be Shazam, but he's too immoral to try to root for. I say that just from a Christian perspective, and not only that, but the inner logic of the movie. When you can't have Shazam or Billy going to a strip club when one of the 7 deadly sins is lust.
Yeah, that's such a great point, man. I didn't even think about that.
It's hypocrisy. He is if the point was to show, as you pointed out earlier, that his father is a hypocrite by placing the blame on his son, then this is another form of hypocrisy. You're having someone who is lustful coming against the 7 deadly sins and winning. How does that work?
That is a great point that I had not considered, but the character is already, the big, the big conflict in this movie, which they kind of make a little bit of fun of at the end, but it's, will Billy succumb to the temptation of the 7 deadly sins and the power they offer him, right? Mm-hmm. And you're right. He very much does so right up front. That's pretty startling. I didn't think about it at all.
They joke about it. It's just odd as far as the story, right? Mm-hmm. If he was maybe, now that I think about it, maybe he repents of all of those 7 deadly sins. Because pride holds him back at one point. Greed, he's using his talents for money. Envy, maybe being jealous of. Well, who would he be jealous of, though? I don't know. I'm just trying to think through now. That
he steals the Batarang from Freddy. I know that's not quite directly envy, but that's the act of an envious person, right? I'll take what you have that I want.
The bullet, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, it was a bullet, it wasn't a Batarang. That's right.
Yeah, that's a good. So what are the other 7 deadly? What are the other deadly sins?
I think you're onto something here. And by the way, just while we're talking about it, this is always part of the Captain Marvel or Shazam origin story. Shazam has a deeply theological origin story. He gets his powers from a donation of patron gods, which some of them are classic mythology, Zeus and Achilles, and things like that. But one of the gifts he's supposed to get is the wisdom of Solomon. And so, this is a product of the 1940s. Judeo-Christian motifs were very much welcome in popular culture in a positive way. Mm-hmm. But the 7 deadly sins has to be drawing on, the biblical record of sins that God hates and he highlights.
Right.
I can't remember the text. Give me a second. I'll find that. But the 7 deadly sins are lust, greed, envy,
Pride,
sloth, gluttony. Did I name anger?
and wrath.
Yeah. So just to give those all together again: pride, envy, greed, anger, sloth, gluttony, lust. And those are variously described as either the 7 deadly sins in the comic book or the 7 deadly enemies of men. As we just mentioned, these are clearly a reference to Proverbs 6:16 through 19. There's additional, so there's 6 in the Proverbs text, 7 in the Shazam canon. But if you're not familiar with the Proverbs 6 passage, there are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. So there's the additional 7 one that's highlighted in some way. Starting in verse 17, haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. And so that motif, again, clearly undergirding these concepts.
So I'm thinking I think gluttony and wrath, perhaps wrath against his friend, and then gluttony, maybe it could just be not necessarily food, but just excess of...
Well, I mean, remember, I think you're onto something here. Maybe people are going to accuse us of stretching it too thin, but I think this is possible. The first thing they do when they get the powers is they go hit a convenience store to buy beer and a bunch of like junk food and snacks, right?
Oh, yeah, and they do eat a ton of beef jerky. They even make a statement that, well, you can die. His friend says you can die from eating too much beef jerky or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And he says, worth it.
Right, right.
So maybe that's what they were trying to show. Like he's got these powers and he is basically committing all the 7 deadly sins, but then to defeat them, he has to repent. Yeah,
reject them, overcome them, something like that. And he does that through
friendship,
friendship and family. Yeah. So I get, anger. There's a couple different times, like he crushes those bullies' trucks.
Oh yeah.
He before he even gets his powers, one of the times that we start to think like there's more to this kid, which is maybe a weird thing to do to set up, but Freddie Freeman is getting picked on by these 2 bullies, and Billy picks up one of his crutches and just warps one of them across the face with it.
Yeah.
So
and you cheered, right?
Yeah, I was pretty happy about it. I mean, is that really that crazy? I mean, they've got a disabled kid getting beat up by 2 Chads. Yeah, that's a cheerable thing. So you may be onto something, that Billy is a young man who has to grow in such a way that he rejects those 7 deadly sins in order to be a champion who can overcome them and create a better world with his family.
Yeah, and that's that if that's true, that makes me like the movie much more because it brings it over into the real world, like we are. Then I would identify with Shazam, the way you overcome these sin or any sin is to repent, turn from it, and we've got to trust in someone greater. Now it's not family and friends, but Jesus Christ is the answer,
Right. And specifically, what do you do when you've repented of your sin, you've rejected that, you've called out to Christ as Savior and nailed to him as Lord, to walk in a way that honors him, you cultivate virtue. And so in some ways, the 7 deadly sins are a good mirror to actual virtue, right? So pride is a corruption and distortion of, not corruption and distortion, but it pulls in opposition to humility. Greed pulling in the opposite direction of self-sacrifice, anger with patience, sloth with diligence, gluttony with perspicuity, right? Or not perspicuity. What's the term of like good self-governance? It's escaped me right now, but where you're mindful of not doing anything to the excess, doing everything in a healthful fashion. Lust, being a
sober.
Sobriety is a good synonym for it too. Lust with love. Inverse of envy would be what? I feel like envy and jealousy are far too often not clearly defined, and I'm just as guilty as everyone else.
Contentment.
Contentment. There you go. Good job, Jared. You're a more virtuous man than I, and I'm not surprised to learn that. So
I don't think you and I should be in a virtue contest. We both lose.
Right. But I mean, again, we're sort of talking about the way that men under the sun seek to live a God glorifying life is to reject these vices and embrace virtue. Mm-hmm. And you also see some of that with Billy, right? Like he gives his powers rather than being greedy. He invites these other people into his life. He uses them not to gain money through selfies and celebrity, but to save the innocent and fight evil. I think you're onto something, that Billy moves from a young man of vice into a champion of virtue. And like you, now that we've kind of worked this out together here on this episode, I think I like the movie even better.
Mm-hmm. It was very subtle, though. It never mentioned. It doesn't even ever mention the 7 deadly sins that I'm aware of. It just kind of presupposes them. And so you don't know that I don't know, they don't telegraph it,
Yeah. But again, if that's what's going on here, that's kudos to Sandberg, because he's not beating you over the head with it, but he's rewarding a careful reflection on the movie. Mm-hmm. So we may be wrong, but I'm going to go with this until we're, demonstrably wrong, because it does make it a better movie.
It does. And it makes sense, too, why he's him-hawing around for so long.
Right. I
feel like it took him forever to finally come around. And
yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, man. And see, that's the problem with the Jeff Johns material. Like this stuff I've mentioned on here before, so I won't stay long, but this is the ultimate wish fulfillment scenario. Little kid says a magic word and becomes Superman. Johns titled that story The Curse of Shazam. And then, Billy Batson was always the most noble character in the story. You were always glad to root for him. Jeff Johns' version of Billy Batson is much worse than David Sandberg's. Batson is self-centered, a jerk, violent, full of temper, suspicious. He's just awful. And I think for people who really love Captain Marvel, that was the greatest offense that Johns gave, that he turned Billy Batson into someone you didn't want to root for. Sandberg, thankfully, shows a redemptive arc. So, I think we've been doing some of question 3 already here, but what's good, true, and awesome? How do we behold common grace in this movie?
I like the cautionary tale of Dr. Savina. Is that how I say his name? Savannah.
Yeah.
I thought that was well done as far as the cautionary tale of trying to please ghosts, or trying to live to please someone else's opinion, or to prove someone wrong. I know we all, that's a desire for revenge, right? It's kind of a sideways desire for revenge. And it reminds me of, do you remember Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, that sent shockwaves at the time.
Oh yeah. And it just, you talk about a cautionary tale of like, dude, you're the greatest basketball player of all time, and you want to stand up at the Hall of Fame and point out, like, good grief, you talk about a chip on your shoulder. What a miserable way to live. And now I bet you money he's miserable because he's not the best GM ever, or the best owner ever.
I feel like we have some responsibility as people there, because that's the exact trait that drove Jordan to the greatness we all celebrated. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's kind of hypocritical on our part to like watch him as an older man be like, man, why couldn't you turn that off? We spent so many years reinforcing it in you and celebrating it and rewarding it. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to act like you should be able to flip that switch. And I just think that's hypocritical on our part.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was a good point, though, as far as the cautionary tale of living to please other people. And then he ended up becoming exactly what he hated in his father,
Yeah, absolutely. Or worse, right?
Yeah. It's just it's odd that greed devoured. It was kind of a juxtaposition, right, where he had greed devour his father, because his father was obviously greedy, but Dr. Savannah was, he was all 7 deadly sins, right? Personified type thing. Like, so that was strange. So I didn't understand that. But on on the flip side,
well, I did think it was thoughtful to make envy the last one that inhabited him. You know what I'm saying? Like that was his driving motivation, and it's the one that did not leave his body until the very end, until it was goaded out by Billy or by Shazam.
When he said when he found out there was a champion, he immediately tried to find him, and I've got to have his power.
Yep,
I've got to. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's well done. I enjoyed the foster family. I mean, as far as the love that was displayed there. You know, these kids that evidently had been rejected at various points by their own families. We don't know the backstory from the others, but the fact that they were able to come together and be a family. I mean, I know it's cheesy, you know, it's a movie, but you know, that gives me hope for families that are brought together that way. You know,
non-traditional. Yeah.
Well, I mean, not necessarily non-traditional, but families that I don't necessarily like that non-traditional language.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
I just mean
foster, adoption, whatever the right terminology is for that.
Yeah, whatever.
Not brought about through procreation, or at least entirely by procreation. Yeah,
right. But it's still definitely a legit family full of love and kindness, and sisters and brothers and parents, and even a little
Christians, we're deeply happy to see fostering and adoption presented well, because we believe that basically the solution to everything that's wrong with us is that God would adopt us into his family.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, I don't mean to betray anybody with that non-traditional language. I'm not trying to throw any shade. I think it's the gospel. God brings sinners into his family through his son. So, anyway.
Right. I enjoyed that. I thought that was great. I enjoyed the humor. I thought the humor was well done. But, you know, again, I thought it was a little slower as far as, you know, I was waiting for him to kick. I would have liked to have seen like 30 more minutes of him whipping people. Like,
yeah. Just more action, more fighting. Sure.
Yeah, more big battles. And I did really like the emphasis on sin devouring people or killing people. Mm-hmm. I don't mean I like that, but that's what it does.
You like it in the sense that it's true. It's telling something that is realistic in the fullest sense.
I love seeing sin personified as monstrous. Mm-hmm. I mean, those monsters were scary, dude. That one tall devil-looking winged creature thing. Goodness.
Yeah, I think that's the one who pummels the old man to death, I think, if I remember rightly. But anyway, again, Sandberg really knows how to bring the horror to bear on this movie.
Oh, yeah. And so I thought all that was good. And then him being able to overcome those things by rejecting them, but also by, like you were talking about, pursuing virtue. You know, I mean, it's repentance. I mean, it's letting go and grabbing a hold, right? You know, your repentance is the letting go, and then faith is the, you know, grabbing hold of something that's contrary to what you're letting go of.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, it's a secular vision of repentance and sanctification, sure. But in the image of God, we have the capacity, although we suppress the truth and unrighteousness, we nonetheless have the capacity to recognize evil as evil and what is good as good. We can't fully embrace it in a way that is redemptive and saving, but you know, right. In civic righteousness, people can make gains right towards goodness and away from evil.
Yes, civil good versus we all agree. I mean, you and I agree that there's no saving good. That's not what this movie's focused on. But we agree that this is definitely civil good. I mean, good grief, if the Church of Satan came out against abortion, I would say amen, you know?
Yeah. And then try to evangelize them while we're standing around, trying to lobby a legislator. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But those were the main things. I thought they got sin right. And I was going to be critical, and I was critical at the beginning about him going to the strip clubs. And I still think if he is trying to show repentance of that, out of all the sins that we mentioned, that's the one that is the least repentant, I guess. Mm-hmm. Because they just kind of laugh it off, like, And as you pointed out earlier, the other foster kid who says not my thing, but maybe, I mean, if we're, this repentance motif, maybe that's him. I don't know. Could be coming at it against, not lusting, right?
Yeah, I wish that was the case. I think they will set that up to be just what everybody, thinks it is. But if there's a world out there, an alternative universe out there where Pedro simply chooses to live uprightly in his sexuality, the way like virtuous men do. I mean, even people who aren't Christians can see through objectification of women, exploitation of women, and choose even like monogamy in a sexually licentious culture and see the value of that. So if there's a world out there like that, I'd like to visit it for a while and watch that movie. Well, what's distorted, evil, and false here? How can I subvert idolatry?
There's no one really. I guess the wizard at the beginning is the one who's virtuous in the whole movie. He's the most virtuous individual. Yeah, see, I guess I don't see him that way because he's so spastic. Like, he clearly pushes Savannah onto the path of evil. You know what I mean? He's not wise. He plays right into the abusive voice of the father. So, we're supposed to think of the wizard as this inheritor of a legacy that should be passed on, and I just think they undermine it quite a bit with that opening scene. Mm-hmm. And the losing of power, and I think the idol is basically secular humanism, right? Man can fix himself type thing. That's what I'm leaning towards. That be good for goodness sake.
Yeah, universal brotherhood of mankind.
Yeah.
If we come together, we can overcome any enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like some of the stuff we've said, where it's not like a simplistic movie, but it's painting with bright colors. Yeah, it's kind of a simplistic presentation of the virtue we should seek after. Again, that universal brotherhood of mankind, but you kind of give it that for being a bright, flashy comic book movie that's not trying to be a complex morality tale.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the last question then, Jared, is how does the gospel apply?
Well, I think Jesus is so much better than every superhero or wizard in this movie. So think of the wizard and how his power is fading, and the power of Christ doesn't fade. I'm thankful that he is God the Son incarnate. And what's interesting is that in being God the Son, he never gains or loses power. Mm-hmm. But pertaining to his humanity, as you read in Hebrews and as we read in Matthew 28:18 through 20, Jesus starts the Great Commission with all authority has been given to me. So it's pertaining to his humanity because he's finished the work his Father has given him to do. He is Lord of creation. And so he does not run out of he doesn't grow weaker and then pass it on to someone else, which I didn't understand that logic in the movie anyways. So now Shazam is all powerful like the wizard used to be, but I guess his power will diminish too. And how can you, if he's transferring his power, why didn't he? How is Shazam not weak like the wizard? Right?
Yeah, he could lose it, right?
Yeah. If he transferred his power to Billy, why wasn't it the weak power? Like, why is it all of a sudden now like the wizard used to be?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, and so Jesus is better than the wizard. That wizard couldn't do anybody any good.
He can't even effectively call. #Calvinism drop.
No, he can't. He can't. But then he's better than Billy because Billy is, as the wizard says, what?
He'll have to do. Like he's a young man who needs redemption. Jesus doesn't need redemption. Right.
He's like, you're all I've got, Billy Badson. I just thought that was interesting, funny, sad, really, because there's none virtuous, no, not one. None righteous. None righteous. No, not one. None seeketh after God. There's none good. And it was just interesting. So if you think of how many years that wizard was searching for someone who was virtuous, mm-hmm. and he didn't find anybody, so he was left with Billy. So he's left with someone who's not righteous.
Yeah, I mean, shades of who can ascend the hill of the Lord, right?
Yeah. I mean, and so the movie says we need, at least for years and years and years, says we need someone. But then the argument is, no, we just need someone who's a little bit, well, not a little bit, but someone who is not as sinful as Dr. Savannah. I guess, and I guess I can use sinful. That's what the movie's talking about,
right,
because of the 7 deadly sins. I wonder if the director's Catholic. I
don't think so. I've followed him as a horror consumer for a number of years, and I've never seen him reference religion in any way.
Because 7 deadly sins are pretty heavy. I mean, it's heavily emphasizing Catholicism, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, I believe so. But I think really he's porting that in from the source material. I really don't think that you can get away from it from the comic book stuff. Because, like I said, every origin story, even Jeff Johns' bad version makes use of that. That's one of the things that's great about Captain Marvel and Shazam. Like, there are clear moral lines that are surprisingly traditional.
So if Jesus is better than the Wizard, he's better than Shazam. I mean, he's more virtuous. He's more righteous. He doesn't, he doesn't go back and forth, and he definitely doesn't. I mean, he is pure in heart. I mean, he is the one that we need, the only one who can save us. And as much as our family, if we want to save family and friends, we can bring about the better world through family and friends, only if they are as virtuous as Christ is. Because otherwise, they will let you down, and you will let them down, and it will not bring about the better world. And so, we need Jesus to clean us up, and praise be to God, that's what He's doing, and He will finish what He started in all of us. And so, I mean, there is a better world coming, and it's the world this movie longs for. But based on its own worldview, it can't produce it.
That's true.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, the Wizard at the beginning is searching for someone pure in heart. And then they finally say, well, we don't really need someone pure in heart.
Pure-ish.
Pure-ish, yeah. We need someone pure-ish in heart.
Yeah, that's well said, man. Absolutely. I just point to, this is what superhero movies do well. They tell us that there really is evil. We need a savior. It's not within us. We need a champion. We need someone from outside. And these problems are too big for us. We have a role to play, but ultimately we're dependent upon Christ to win the victory. And I think that's why these movies continue to do really well in the box office. They're one of the few ways that our culture still gets to bump up against the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I expect that. And people keep calling for superhero fatigue. I think that, maybe that will come someday. It's hard to think there will be Avengers for real this time. It's the end in 20 years. But I do think well-done superhero movies are going to resonate particularly in a secular culture, because they're kind of the closest we get to what God's actually doing in Jesus.
There's one more thing I want to point out, and I probably should have pointed it out earlier, but
hey, this is a good time to do that. We're going to move into wrap up. Anything else to say? So lay it on me.
Yeah, Dr. Savannah, the sin is what gave him power.
Sure.
I mean, that's an interesting concept, to think that envy, pride, greed, lust, all those things. I mean, you can actually that does give many people power.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the root of the temptation for those things. Lust, pretty clearly, you can have sexual gratification, sexual lust. Anyway, you can have sexual gratification outside the parameters that God has established. So you get to say yes to what God has said no about. Envy and coveting, same deal, right? You may not be able to take your neighbor's property, but you can fantasize about what it would be like to have it and to take it. It's all perverse versions, but it's an attempt to have what God has said is forbidden, which is an attempt to be your own God.
Yeah. I think I would have liked to have seen those sins destroyed and Dr. Savannah die at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I get why they don't do that, though. One, I think one of the things that's compelling about the mythology of Shazam is that these sins can be restrained, but until Christ returns, we would know. But like the people who don't have a vision of a catastrophic intervention by Christ, they would think the sins couldn't be restrained, but they are always a threat to return, right? And then with Savannah, it is good for the hero to say, you're not going to get justice, you're going to get mercy. So I'm with you. I get that, like, if Shazam really is a full-on Christ figure, he cuts the serpent's head off and ends sin. But I think Shazam, as you've talked about, Jesus is better. Shazam's a lesser Christ figure, and so the redemption that he brings is necessarily lesser.
I was thinking just for the this is where sin leads. Like, it leads to death. It leads to the grave. It leads to...
Well, it did betray him, right? When envy bailed out on him, it left him to drop off the side of a building.
That's right. And that's right. And Shazam saved him. Yeah. I enjoy the movie. I enjoy it better after we've talked about it.
Me too. You've really unlocked this thing for me in a way that is helpful. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate you helping me think through these things, because it's the pushback, and it's just helpful, man, to sit down and talk. And I mean, this is a good movie to watch with your teenager and to discuss the deceptiveness of sin and the pursuit of virtue, and to talk about repentance, what it is and what it isn't. I mean, this movie really gives a lot of fodder for those discussions.
Yep, 100%. Good to use as examples of virtue and vice. I mean, all the things we've been talking about in this episode. So, I like this one better. I would have figured I'd seen this multiple times by now, but I haven't. I think you've talked me into wanting to go see it again. So maybe I'll figure out some time in my schedule. Maybe it's time to take my 6-year-old to see this after all.
Yeah, you can cover his eyes a lot.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, anything else to say on Shazam?
That's it, buddy.
All right, man. Well, where can our listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Jared H. Moore. You can find me on Facebook at All Truth is God's Truth. I've got another podcast. I've been noticing the numbers ticking up a little bit. Maybe you folks are listening some. I've neglected it for about 1.5 years, but it's called All Truth is God's Truth. Check it out. You can find Jeff and I on our Facebook group, Pop Culture Coram Deo Perpetual After Party.
That's right.
Come discuss Shazam with us, other movies, and what movies you'd like to see us review.
100%. We would love to hear from you. We're on most social media platforms. Everywhere, basically, the handle is PCCD Pod. So reach out to us. We'd really appreciate it if you would take time next time you're sitting in front of a keyboard to leave us a review on wherever you're getting your podcasts, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, anything that you could do in that front, we would really appreciate. So if you can give us a 5-star review, we'd be very thankful. But if you say, hey, good conscience, can't give you 5 stars, give us what you can. It helps us know how to tailor the podcast to serve people, because that's what we want to do. We want to serve the church, and it helps us know what is helpful, what's not helpful. So we would greatly appreciate that. It also gives new listeners a chance to find us through the mysterious algorithms of those podcast services. I'm at Right Jeff on any social media platform that you might find yourself on. I think I'm there as well, so I'd love to connect with you. And we're planning to keep this train rolling. Jared, what's coming out next that we're going to take a look at? Do you know yet?
La Llorona?
The Curse of La Llorona from James Wan. Father of the Conjuring franchise. I think they've come out and said now that La Llorona is part of the Conjuring universe. So we're going back to the world of scary movies, and I'm excited, man. I love a good scary movie.
Me too, buddy. Me too. And the Conjuring needs something good, don't they? Yeah,
man. The Nun was like the movie equivalent of Pope Francis's papacy.
That's funny right there.
Yeah. Both of them corrupted by Romanish craziness. Anyway, this is the episode of The Rant by Jeff, and we're gonna put a bow on it, folks. So we'll be back with you to talk about The Curse of La Llorona, and we appreciate you listening. For Jared Moore, I am Jeff Wright, and we want to encourage you to live every moment as if you are before the face of God, because you are. We'll talk to you next time.